welcome to the GRC 2020 Summit. My name is Harry Noto from the Metric Stream European team, and I manage a number of our clients and business development activities. For this session, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Simon Cory from Nationwide Building Society. As Director of Risk Strategy at Nationwide, Simon has been responsible for the organization's risk framework, risk systems, and for managing the CRO office. He was recognized as Metric Stream's GRC practice leader at the 2019 London Summit and was named Risk Manager of the Year. Simon has worked for Nationwide for 20 years in a variety of roles in the first line and second line, finance and transformation. Before working at Nationwide, Simon was also a chartered accountant. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Harry. Right, I'm here this morning to talk about the need for GRC and the GRC transformation journey that we've been on through Nationwide in the time that I've been in charge of that initiative. I'll start by telling you a little bit about Nationwide Building Society and also how risk is structured within the organisation before going on to that. So Nationwide is a fairly old organisation. It's been in place as an organisation to fund home owning and building and to do that through retail savings. So we are an organisation that is funded from the retail markets, and we are owned by our retail savers and our retail mortgage borrowers. So it's a fairly traditional organisation as a result. Nationwide has a balance sheet size of circa £250 billion, which equates to about $290 billion in assets. We've got 15 million customers, 700 branches, 18,000 employees. So we're a reasonably big organisation in the UK. We pride ourselves on customer service. As we're owned by our customers, customer service is incredibly important for us. And we're a provider of a broad range of retail financial services products, not just mortgages and savings. They are our core products, but also personal current account, credit card, personal loans. And we are therefore kind of a systemically important organisation within the UK. We're placed number 2 in the mortgage and savings market in the UK. So we're a big player in the retail savings and mortgage markets in the UK. Risk within Nationwide is a very strong area. As we're owned by our customers, we pride ourselves on our ability to manage risks well. We kind of put ourselves in our customers' shoes constantly and consider what would our customers expect us to do. Therefore, we are very prudent as an organisation. We have a good, healthy, strong balance sheet, strong capital, liquidity and funding positions. And we have a very good relationship with all of our UK regulators, meaning that we touch wood, do not suffer enforcement much in the UK, and our level of losses is low as well. So the organisation is successful from a risk management perspective. The organisation is successful. We have a large first line risk team that is spread across different communities in the organisation. So the way that Nationwide is structured is we have a CEO, and underneath the CEO he has a set of community leaders reporting into him. I report into the CRO, who is head of the second line, and second line is pretty slim. Second line consists pretty much of oversight. She also has responsibility for a small number of first line teams, first line credit risk, first line fraud, and first line AML, which are bigger because they're operational areas. Across the rest of the organisation, first line has its own individual risk teams to manage different areas of risk, be that market risk, solvency risk, or lots of different areas of operational risk. They're running individual communities across the organisation. And as a result of that, from where I sit reporting to the CRO in the second line with the responsibility for setting the risk framework and for providing the systems to the first line to run their risk management, I have a large number of stakeholders to interact with day to day to ensure that the work that we do within our team to set the frame for how risk management should be organised in the society is set correctly, proportionately and appropriately, and will succeed when it gets operationalised within the first line. I have a lot of first line experience, as do most of my team, and that is why I think we're successful, because we can very easily put ourselves in our direct customer shoes within the organisation, our first line customers principally, who themselves then are dealing with our retail customers. So we are setting the frame for risk management. We're providing tools and systems to the organisation's risk management functions in first line to run risk for Nationwide's customers. And as I said there, Nationwide is very successful at that. So that's a little bit of background as to kind of risk in Nationwide and what the organisation, how the organisation is constructed. I'll tell you a little bit now then about our GRC transformation journey. So we started our journey probably about 3 years ago, and the genesis of that was that we recognised that our risk work was overly complex for the size and scale of the organisation, and as a result, the technology sort of mirrored that, and it meant that the way that we manage risks across the organisation, whilst doing it successfully, was not being done optimally or efficiently. The society really needed to go on a journey to simplify both the way that we define risk management for the first line and the processes for the first line, but also then to evidence that we, through understanding our risks better, we control them better and potentially bring in some efficiency to our control estate. So the main drivers really for the new GRC technology were around hardening the control environment. Nationwide, as I've said, has been successful at managing its risks, and we suffer low losses. However, we've relied very heavily on individuals in the organisation who've been there for a period of time. We've relied on people in their own individual communities, in their silos, to run their business well. Therefore, kind of joining it up from an enterprise level has always been a bit difficult. So what we set out to achieve was to harden the control environment, to deliver real value through reducing the complexity of the control environment, optimizing the control environment, deduplicating controls where they exist across the organization, and potentially plugging gaps in our control environment that we didn't know existed because we were operating in silos across the firm. So one of the drivers for us was to harden that environment, and that is one which really will kind of lead to increased value for the investment in risk management in Nationwide. We were also in a situation where our legacy system was difficult to use, and our users didn't really want to interact with it. It was difficult to get data into the system, and it was also difficult to get data out of the system. Therefore, kind of putting data into the system, our users spent a lot of time articulating risks and finessing how risks were worded within the system. They also spent a lot of time extracting data and manually putting that data into PowerPoint presentations broadly to take to local team meetings and so on, all of which was admin heavy and not really generating too much value for the investment in risk. So we obviously wanted to improve that, to improve both the efficiency of risk, but also to improve the effectiveness of it. The final driver really for our GRC technology program was that we had an end of life system that was going out of date and had been heavily customized. When we implemented it originally, we heavily customized that system and really kind of wrapped it around our risk framework in the organization. And as we started on our journey of simplifying our risk framework, one of our initial pieces of work was to simplify the risk taxonomies and the controls taxonomies, which we had, and we found that our legacy system couldn't cope with that. The legacy system had been customized so heavily that if we were to implement our new taxonomies into that system, it would effectively be a new implementation. So instead of upgrading our old system, we went back out to market and effectively started from scratch and established, okay, if we were going to implement a new system, what would be the best system for us to implement? So we started from scratch there to be able to use the simplified taxonomies which we built. An important thing to say there is that the taxonomies that we built were industry standard taxonomies. So in the past, we had created Nationwide's own risk taxonomies that were a mixture of department names, particular risk areas, or kind of sub-communities that needed a bit of focus within the organisation. what we tried to do here was to use the Basel risk taxonomy and to use standard controls taxonomy to say, well, these are industry standard library items that we should be looking to put into our system here. Therefore, kind of build the system around the industry standard view rather than around Nationwide's special view. So that's a summary of the need for technology. Now, in terms of implementation practices, we set out on our journey, as I say, to having started our progress to simplify the risk framework. We then wanted to kind of base everything we did on industry standard. We wanted to have a mantra of zero customization, which meant that we looked to configure, not customize, to take out of the box solutions that we knew were working successfully for some of our peers in the UK, and we're very comfortable then to simply configure the out of the box solution and to change the framework if we needed to align with the system. Now, that was something which was totally different to the way Nationwide had done things in the past. In the past, we had effectively designed our framework first and then looked to design a system to wrap around the framework, which resulted in us having a heavily customized legacy system. This approach here was to take industry standard frameworks and taxonomies and to take an out of the box solution to implement that. And we built up fairly close relationships with a number of our UK banking peers and would regularly say, well, listen, if this works for that peer organisation, Nationwide will need to change the way it does its business to align with what they do. If it works for them, it should work for us. So that was a mantra which we kind of held true through the whole implementation, and I'm pleased to say we successfully implemented M7 in February of this year without any customizations, which will help us obviously when we look to upgrade. It'll also help us in the future where we look to optimize the platform, build the platform out, and add future use cases and apps to the platform that we've implemented here, so that we can we'll be able to manage the whole platform sustainably into the future and won't find ourselves in the same situation where we have an end-of-life system that's heavily customized that if we look to upgrade we'll find is very, very expensive. So that was one of our mantras. The other mantra which we kind of ran with through the project was one of engagement, and really we worked super hard on this for good reasons. As I said earlier on, I'm a first line person. I'm sat in the second line reporting to the Chief Risk Officer, but most of my history has been in the first line. That is also true of my team. And I've got an absolutely fabulous team who really worked very, very hard to engage with our user group from across the organisation. We put in place business champions in individual communities. As I discussed earlier on, we have a fairly traditional community structure across the organisation that has different risk teams set within it. What we wanted to try and do through establishing business champions was to implement local super users and put super users into the first line teams and to help them to drive adoption into their business areas and to make them feel that actually adoption was something that wasn't optional. Adoption was something which they needed to drive themselves within their areas. It wasn't necessarily us then within my team from the second line imposing this change on them. It was more them imposing their change on the rest of their teams. So we try to encourage that change from within purposefully. And myself and some of my team members were in place when we put our legacy system in 5 years ago or something like that. We know what it was like when we were in the first line to be on the receiving end of a bad implementation. And this was something that certainly didn't work well first time round. And the first line teams did not feel sufficiently engaged. So that was something we worked really, really hard with to make sure that we did better this time round. We, as a result of that, in addition, established quarterly user engagement events. These had different agendas at different times. sometimes we took all of our users off-site for a morning to a local hotel and talked to them about and showed them screens and showed them about the journey we were on and tried to explain why we were doing what we were doing to take them on the journey. Other times we hired out our own innovation suite, which we have in our head office, and the team did an absolutely incredible job of building some hands-on engagement events for our users to come into the room and start playing with the system, and to feel that they were helping us with the configuration and the build of the system. We listened to them and we listened to their needs and we listened to their requirements to help us to be confident that we were configuring the system in the correct way for the organization. Despite the fact we weren't customizing, obviously any tool needs configuring, and there are a lot of options in the way you configure it. And we certainly wanted our users to feel that we were listening to them and that we were taking what they mentioned to us there through this engagement events back into the sessions which we ran when we were configuring the system. We invited them in addition to configuration workshops. So we're implementing an out-of-the-box tool, as I said. However, there are options that we let them help us with, working through the configurations for how the data model would be built, and also kind of the shape of the system and the look and feel of dashboards and so on. We asked our users to help us configure the system so that when they received the system, it was the system they expected it to be. We also spent a bit of time, and I did actually personally, with the regulators, the UK regulators, showing them the system, explaining to them the journey we were on, explaining to them really that this wasn't just a system implementation, this was a risk framework simplification initiative operationalized the system, and showed them the system and showed them what it could do and the different maturity that this would bring to the firm. And we did that purposefully, knowing that the regulator speaks obviously regularly with the CRO, but also with the non-executive directors and the executive directors of Nationwide. And in many respects, this was helpful for us because it helped us with traction and helped us with buy-in in the organisation, which then led to the C-suite members asking to have demonstrations of the system, asking to see how it ran for their areas. And really, I suppose, there was a penny dropping moment for them when they realised that this could help them to do their job, help them to demonstrate reasonable steps to our regulators in the UK. And actually, if they didn't engage, there was some critical data that existed in the risk register that's operationalized through the system that the regulator themselves would receive. And if they hadn't engaged properly, the regulator themselves might start asking them questions about, what if this data exists and we've already received and we know how you're running your own business area? Why aren't you across your own data? So that was a very important thing to do, actually, to engage. And honestly, I don't think you can do too much of it. As we set up our team structure, we put in a couple of extra people actually than you might ordinarily do if you were doing this from scratch for the first time, who spent the vast majority of their time engaging with our users, and it's paid dividends. And having gone live in February, user adoption is exactly where we want it to be, and people absolutely recognise that we've implemented a fantastic tool here. In the final and the third point I'd make here under implementation practices is understanding of industry approach. So as I said, we tried to implement an industry standard tool with industry standard taxonomy, an out-of-the-box system that had not been customized, that just simply being configured. However, we wanted to have visibility that would allow us to represent ourselves to the C-suite and for me to my boss, to the CRO, but also to the regulator and so on. That would say that the system we were implementing here was the right one, and that our peers had adopted it successfully. So we built close relationships with people in other UK banking peers. We worked with KPMG on our implementation of Metric Stream, who allowed us to have insight into how others had configured the system, also sometimes put us in touch with some of their own clients to speak to them about their own practices and their own learnings, to ensure that what we were doing was not special for Nationwide. And certainly all we've tried to do here is to implement a simple system in a simple way, and to adopt simple practices rather than the Nationwide norm of the past, which had been to overcomplicate these things. But knowing that we were doing that with respect to what the industry norms were really important for us. So we purposefully built relationships across the industry and through our third parties to ensure that the implementation was one which was industry standard into Nationwide. So really, they are the main implementation practices that I would highlight. I mean, certainly zero customization is massively important and will be for us for the future. Engagement, and also having an external, having visibility of the external market and making sure that what we were doing there was consistent with the industry. They're the three main lessons I would take, and the three things I would pass on to anybody listening to this. In terms of benefits of implementation, we have achieved everything we set out to. We have a single source of the truth. The GRC platform is seen by the CRO as the place where all of the risk and control data and loss event data in Nationwide is mastered. It is the central record. It is the only record that we use to report to the regulator from in the firm. And that over time will be very helpful as we look to potentially consolidate other systems, simplify the estate, and to ensure that risk management is embedded in a consistent manner across the society. Knowing that this is a single source of the truth, which is the predecessor system wasn't necessarily thought in that way, has been vitally important for us. We've also been able to get visibility of control gaps. We have, for the first time, been able to collect together data that shows the effectiveness of our controls, which controls are being tested and which aren't, which controls relate to which risks, and therefore which controls potentially could we choose to simplify, switch off, deduplicate, or optimize in some other way, or potentially use to link to manage other risks, so that we can then switch off other controls elsewhere in the estate. Visibility of the performance of controls is something which I think Nationwide has historically not been quite as good as it should have been at. We've been able to do it in isolation, in silos. We've never been able to join it up holistically to demonstrate to regulators and the board and so on how the whole estate is operating and the effectiveness of controls across the whole organisation. So that is something which we've been able to do with a system for the first time, which I think is a great success. And as I say, that is where there is real value. That is where we have been able to successfully speak to our stakeholders around the organisation that shows there's real value add in this for them. And greater data integrity. Data integrity and accuracy obviously is a focus for all of us around the world in terms of data regulation, and being able to demonstrate that the data we report to the regulators and report through our annual report and accounts is sound and has good lineage and is understood and well controlled. The system has allowed us to demonstrate that much more than its legacy predecessor, where essentially we did have those controls. They were in place. They were very, very manual, and processes that we wrapped around all of our regulatory reporting were very cumbersome and allowed us to kind of get to where we needed to, but in a pretty painful way. So we've been able to improve that dramatically through the implementation of MetricStream, and data integrity is something which is much, much more immediately obvious for us to be able to show to regulators and to the board, whereas previously we'd struggled with that. So that's a summary of our GRC journey in Nationwide, a summary of risk management in Nationwide. I'll be very happy to speak to anybody who's been watching this outside of this, and my contact details should be available to you. And I realise that everyone's GRC journey is a bit more painful than we want it to be, and I recognise also that funding is scarce and will continue to be scarce, and trying to be successful in this space, I think, is difficult. The one thing I would say that we just wrapping up that we kind of clocked early on was to maintain traction and to maintain the organisation's backing for the whole implementation. We worked very carefully early on to establish that we wanted to be relevant. We wanted to be able to demonstrate that the value add that the system could bring would be through hardening the control environment. But what we had to kind of latch ourselves onto the organisation's initiatives at each point in time, and so at one point in time, operational resilience was critically important. We had another number of risk events that we wanted to continue to show how relevant metric stream would be in that environment. I mean, most recently, obviously, COVID-19. If we were building our business case right now, I'm pretty sure that we would demonstrate how metric stream could help us to manage the COVID-19 situation. So not trying to do it in a silo and trying to show how relevant you are to the business, I think is vitally important. So, Harry, I think that wraps it up for me. I'd be very happy to take any questions from anybody after this, and for them to get in touch with me separately.
Thank you, Simon, for sharing your experience with Nationwide GRC's journey. Some great lessons learned, and which I believe a lot of our clients and members of the community will get a lot from. One of the key success factors I got from your project was the strong focus on business team involvement, meeting the business objectives, and managing transformation with business champions. Thank you again, Simon.
Thank you, Harry.